I have a weird background with RPGs. On one hand, some of my favorite games are RPGs. Pokemon, my favorite franchise ever, is as RPGs you can get. That being said, excluding the Pokemon series, the amount of RPGs I've played and thoroughly enjoyed probably resides in the single digits, standouts including Undertale and Paper Mario, which are among my favorite games ever. Particularly, I haven't played much of any traditional Square Enix RPG. These franchises are for the most part untouched for me: Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and of course, the Mana series. Trials of Mana originally released back in 1995 on the Super Famicom, but it didn't get localized into a collection of Mana last year. Now, less than a year later, we have a 3D remake of the game. I had been hearing positive buzz surrounding the game, and I remembered it looking interesting when it was shown in a direct last year. However, given my limited history with traditional RPGs, I didn't know enough specifics about the gameplay to have an idea whether I would enjoy it, so I was hesitant to drop $50 on the game. Especially when you look at the price tag and then look at the game, it looked like it might be a bit low budget to justify the price tag. Fortunately, Trials of Mana has a demo. This is exactly the type of game I love to have a demo for. Like, hey, are you interested in the game, but not sure enough to spend $50? Well, here you go, try a nice chunk for free. And it is a nice chunk. My playthrough of the demo took me over 3 hours. This isn't one of those demos that exists separately of the game. It is simply the beginning of the game up to a certain point. Not to mention, there's a lot more content there than initially meets the eye, given the way the game's character roster works. After an opening cutscene about the creation of the world and the Mana Stones, you're greeted to a selection of 6 different characters, of which you must choose 3. You pick one of these characters to star as, and the other 2 will eventually join the party. I picked Angela as well as Reese because, well, we're in a quarantine, and I also chose Kevin because he seemed cool. Although actually, when I did Square Enix's quiz afterwards, I really did get Angela, so I guess I made the right choice. When selecting characters, you are given about a paragraph of exposition for each one, in addition to their skills. Just from this exposition, the game manages to paint clear, and for the most part very interesting pictures for its main characters, making me feel like I was missing out no matter who I chose. This exposition also talks a bit about the world's various kingdoms and such, which was helpful for beginning to learn about the game's world. The game's world, by the way, is something I loved continuing to learn about as I played through the demo and visited the various regions. Once you select your characters, the screen fades to black and then opens up to a new cutscene. Since I selected Angela as my primary character, we see a cutscene depicting the state of Altena, the kingdom of magicians. The True Queen's magic is all that keeps the freezing temperatures of the surrounding snowy lands at bay. But, as the mana of the world grows weaker, so does her power, and bit by bit, ice and cold is beginning to encroach onto Altena. As a result, we see a War Council meeting, where the Crimson Wizard, along with the True Queen, announce that they intend to collect all the Mana Stones in order to travel to the Sanctuary of Mana and obtain the Sword of Mana, which should increase the Queen's magic capabilities, thus saving Altena. However, many different kingdoms possess the various Mana Stones, so they must invade and obtain these stones by force. Then we cut to Angela, who is off in a separate room, where a new cutscene shows us more about Angela, enhancing the information from the character select screen. Angela is the only daughter of the Queen, and with her mother preoccupied by her leadership position, Angela grew up lonely and disconnected from her mother. As a result, she learned to dress in a scantily clad way in order to attract attention from other people. Furthermore, despite being the True Queen's heir, Angela still has not developed her magic powers, and she constantly feels like a failure as a result. Eventually, we are given control of Angela, and are given time to explore the castle and get the hang of the controls, which I enjoyed. At a certain point, we find out that the Queen has summoned us. Upon reaching the Queen, Angela learns about the upcoming invasion, and surprisingly, the Queen needs Angela's help. In order to awaken Altena's Mana Stone, they are going to perform a forbidden spell that results in death. However, since the Queen and the Crimson Wizard are too important for this, they decide to use Angela's life as the sacrifice. According to the Queen, Angela's failures have been a constant stain for her, and a noble death will be the best possible end for her failure of an heir. Fortunately, as she learns about this information and is about to be killed, Angela's magic awakens, at least for a moment, and in a burst of emotion, Angela teleports away. At this point, I realized how invested I had become in Angela's storyline, and that investment ran deeper throughout the demo as Angela's story continued. Angela ends up somewhere outside the castle in the snow, and with no other choice, she makes away from the castle. When monsters stand in her way, she learns that she can fight, which is a powerful moment for her, and was for me as well. Still, she can only go so far until she passes out in the snow, especially with her outfit, but fortunately someone finds her and brings her to a nearby village. Angela knows she can't stay in Altena for long, so she seeks a fortune teller who advises her to seek counsel from the High Priest in Wendell. With nothing else to do, Angela heeds this advice and takes a ship elsewhere. The next part of the demo is the only awkward part of the storyline. After sailing away, the game simply cuts to Angela being in another city on the way to Wailu. Yet apparently, while we were here, the city was attacked by the beastmen of Ferolia, and it's now under their control, so we can't leave. We eventually escape anyway, but the way the game randomly cuts to this situation is very jarring, and it asks a lot for the player to assume and understand. A really cool thing about this part of the demo, though, is that 3 of the other playable characters were also residing around the city for whatever reason. However, since they don't mean any more to Angela than any other person does right now, talking to them yields but a few lines of dialogue, granting a small amount of insight as to what's going on in their journeys at the moment. I even met Kemen, who's going to be in my party, but he didn't join it yet as he has no reason to join me right now, which makes sense, and is very cool. These interactions sell the idea that the other characters in this game really are other characters with their own motivations, beliefs, and journeys. Eventually on my travels, I did meet Reese. We realized that we both needed to reach Wendell, so we decided to team up, aka she joined my party. The coolest thing was that at this moment, the game let me go back and play Reese's journey so far, that by the time I came back to real time, I was thoroughly invested in both of these characters. I really love the character prologues, and I can totally see myself playing through the game again, or at least the beginning, in order to see the other ones, time permitted. The various main characters of this game, as well as the interweaving stories of these characters and the world around them, are a major highlight for me so far. I particularly had a lot of interaction with Charlotte, which was surprising for me given she isn't in my party, and given how little I've seen of the other 3 characters. At the point where the demo ends, though, Angela and Reese both find out that they have a common goal, as awakening all the mana stones in order to restore the Tree of Mana will solve each of their problems. This worries me a little bit, as currently, the various kingdoms have conflicting objectives and agendas, and I reckon the characters do as well, some of them being from conflicting kingdoms, though I haven't had any insight into the other 4 characters yet. I worry that a common goal might resolve some of this conflict before it even really starts. As I want to go deeper into that conflict, I want to see it evolve. As for the other characters, I understand that there has to be a reason for all of them to be in the same party, but I hope their motives are at least slightly different, conflicting with each other throughout the game. I would be disappointed if the interwoven stories element of this game that I love so far was scrapped so early on and turned into one blander storyline. That being said, Kevin isn't even in my party yet, so while Angela and Reese essentially have a common goal right now, hopefully things are more complex than they appear they might be. Another aspect of this game I should no doubt mention is the combat, which is action-based as opposed to turn-based. So far, I've got a light attack, a heavy attack, a charged attack, and what's essentially a super. Furthermore, like in many games, combining light and heavy attacks can do different things. For example, one light attack followed by a heavy attack will knock an enemy away, which is helpful as you are often fighting multiple enemies at once. Additionally, you can jump as well as evade, which you can also do in the air, and both of these things let you manually avoid enemy attacks. You can also switch between characters on the fly, but so far, my 2 characters play pretty much the same. I get the impression that we will learn more moves throughout the game, which will likely use MP, and I expect being given more options will make battles even more interesting, especially as that would make switching between characters mid-battle more viable, as doing so would give you access to different moves and a different MP bar. Still, the combat has felt fluid and fun, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And at least so far, it is not too simple or anything like that. It is complex and requires the player to put in effort. As a result, I wouldn't instinctively call the combat easy. Despite this, looking back, I realized that I don't think I've ever been below 80% or so health. This might make one say it's too easy, but like I said, it is complex and is not overly simple, so it wasn't a problem for me, again at least not so far. Perhaps the player HP versus the amount of damage enemy attacks do is just not balanced super well, as the game would probably feel a bit more intense and interesting whilst coming closer to death on occasion. Of course, there is a hard difficulty anyway, so this whole point might be a bit pointless, and I am thinking of switching to that difficulty. It's also only the beginning of the game. Another thing I'm really enjoying about Trials of Mana so far is that even though I'm not far into the game, there has already been a part where while I was on my journey, there were 3 different places I could go, even though only one of them was the place that I needed to go. Naturally, I went the other ways first. I got to explore a nice little oceanfront town completely separate from the main story. And then, when something happened in the main story that brought that town to relevance and caused it to drastically change, it affected me a lot more because that caused it to feel like a real place. In a real world, you can go to different places in any order, because all of these places exist at once. So when a game gives even a taste of that, it makes the whole world and every town within it seem way more real. This feeling that the world around me is real and breathing is something tangible in Trials of Mana, starting all the way in the beginning with the exposition about various kingdoms, and enhanced even further by the knowledge that other characters that I could have just as easily chosen are also on journeys right now, just as real and just as important as mine. Not everything is good in Trials of Mana. While the game's story has affected me a lot already, it's also a bit cheesy at times, and sometimes requires a bit more suspension of belief than you would like. For example, in Reese's prologue, there are a bunch of doors blocked off by soldiers who say no one is allowed to enter if you try to make your way in. But like, I'm the lead soldier. I command you. I get if maybe something is so important they can only enter if the king himself gives you permission, but you're telling me this many places are accessible by the king only, and not his second in command? Later on, there's a very weird moment when Reese basically lets her brother get kidnapped by running away and not realizing for many moments that her brother is not with her. I would have felt a lot more forlorn about the situation if that moment wasn't so laughably hard to take seriously. Furthermore, the voice acting is pretty spotty, which again makes certain moments difficult to take seriously. Maybe I should have gone with the Japanese. And while I do like the art style, the budget shows in other areas too. The overabundance of reused character models, for example, is something that certainly takes away realism. After playing Trials of Mana for a little over 3 hours, the demo ended, and I wanted to keep playing, so I immediately made my way to the eShop and purchased the game. Demo, mission accomplished. Well done. Fortunately, your progress continues over to the real game. I am really enjoying the story, world, and characters so far, as well as the combat, and I'm excited to keep going. I couldn't quite tell you what's in store for me in the rest of the game, and I do have some worries, as well as some slight qualms, but I thoroughly enjoyed this demo. And after all, the demo is free, so if you have interest in Trials of Mana, I would highly recommend you check out the demo. I'm Youngster Skaymore, it's good to be back, and I will see you guys next time.